All right. Shalom Israel. Yahweh Bashem Yahushua Barakatham to my brothers. Yahweh Shemal Bashem Yahushua to my sisters. This is Wednesday night's law class on Priest and Officer Radah I will love. Before I get into my topic, for those who are tuning in on Facebook or on YouTube, if you could like the video, thumb up the video, and share it so we can continue pushing this truth all across the world. Also, big shout out to Commanding General Yahanna for never dropping his sword, still pushing this truth going strong. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, sir. So the water for that. Not only is he the hardest working man in Israel, he is a father to us all in this truth, who raised us up to be who the Lord called us to be. And that's to be soldiers in the Lord's army, to be men of war and integrity, to be leaders on the front lines, defending the fatherless and the widows, raising the dead, taking care of the poor. We do what your religious leaders wouldn't do. We take care of our people. We show you how to repent, get your life together, and follow these laws, statutes, and commandments. All right, so now with that being said, tonight's topic, the story of King David, part 4. All right, the story of King David, part 4. Now, we've covered a lot of information these past 3 weeks going over the story of King David. You understand, from his upbringing, how he was chosen as the next anointed king after Saul, the pettiness of Saul pursuing after David, the unbreakable brotherhood relationship between David and Jonathan. You understand, his ability to keep his honor by not putting Saul to death because he was still the Lord's anointed. It's so many lessons to learn from this book. You understand? This is why the law precepts we've been bringing out is so important, because the law is what brings us to life. The law is how we obtain and keep brotherhood amongst each other, how we deal righteously with one another. You understand? Who we're not supposed to trust. Matter of fact, we just went over last week about Doeg, the Edomite, Saul's right-hand man who snitched on David, telling him of his whereabouts. You understand? And Saul always had a soft spot for our oppressor. You understand? He also spared Agag and some of the cattle when the Lord told him to destroy everything. And because he didn't do it and allowed him to live, one of his descendants later on down the road is held responsible, you understand, for murdering us in the book of Esther, where we learn about the Feast of Purim. Throughout David's life, he stayed on the run from King Saul. You understand? Had plenty of opportunities to put him to death, and he chose not to lay a hand on him. Because why? Because he was anointed. And he also understands that there's a punishment for laying a hand on the Lord's anointed. You understand? That's why every week at camp, right? Every week at camp, we boldly go out there and we speak on the streets, ready and prepared to lay our life down if necessary, because we know the Lord is with the UPK. Ask about the Kentucky 8. You understand? Ask about what we did for our Haitian brothers down at the border, how we took a path that led straight into the cartel territory, safe and sound. You understand? Because the Lord is with us. Doing the work of the Lord and obeying the commandments is how we earn his protection. You understand? Well, David did the same thing. He obeyed the Lord in everything he was told to do, which was why he was so successful in every battle that he fought. And as much as I brag hard on David, right? As much as I brag hard on David for the past 3 weeks, y'all should know that this is the man who Christ descends from. This is the throne that he will sit on when he returns. Who you are and where you descend from on your father's side is very important in our culture, because that's where our bloodline comes from. You understand? Christ couldn't be the root and offspring of David if he didn't descend from David's lineage. Otherwise, the prophecies about him coming from David would have been a lie. So now we're going to pick back up from where we left off in 1 Samuel 25:1. Right after David confronted Saul face to face with the evilness of how he's been pursuing him for no reason. All right, so now we're going to start at 1 Samuel chapter 25. And we're going to start at verse 1. All right, this is 1 Samuel chapter 25, and we're going to start at verse 1. It says, and Samuel died, and all the Israelites were gathered together and lamented him and buried him in his house at Ramah. And David arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. Verse 2. And there was a man in Maon whose possessions were in Carmel. And the man was very great. And he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. And he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Verse 3. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail. And she was a woman of good understanding and of a beautiful countenance. But the man was churlish and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb. You understand? She was Abigail, right? So this woman right here, she was a woman of good understanding. I mean, she wasn't a simple woman, you understand, with an attitude all the time, trying to come up with any reason to argue with you. Like, there's peace in your house when you come home at night. You understand? This was a good woman that this brother was married to. And she was beautiful. It says she was of beauty. She's Salakia. And of a beautiful countenance, meaning this was a beautiful woman, man. He had a beautiful wife. You understand? And then it says, but the man was churlish and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb. You understand? What does it mean when it says that he's churlish and evil in his doings? Meaning this was a rude cat. You understand? Somebody with a bad temper. Don't have nothing nice to say to nobody. He's stingy. You understand? Don't want to share nothing with nobody, regardless of how much that they have. Because it just said that he had great possessions, man. He was not poor by a long shot. This man was very rich, very wealthy, had a lot of money, man. You understand? Like, okay, think about somebody on your job, right? Think about somebody on your job that's hard to work with, like your coworker or your supervisor. Hell, maybe even a customer that you dealt with before. And when you see that person, you know you finna catch hell with them. Well, this was Nabal. You understand? And it said that he was of the house of Caleb, meaning this brother was from the tribe of Judah. All right. Verse 4. It says, and David heard in the wilderness that Nabal did shear his sheep. Verse 5. And David sent out 10 young men. And David said unto the young men, get you up to Carmel and go to Nabal and greet him in my name. Verse 6. And thus shall you say to him that liveth in prosperity, peace be both to thee, and peace be to thine house, and peace be unto all that thou hast. Verse 7. And now I have heard that thou hast shearers. Now thy shepherds which were with us, we hurt them not, neither was there aught missing unto them, all the while they were in Carmel. Verse 8. Ask thy young men, and they will shew thee. Wherefore, let the young men find favor in thine eyes, for we come in a good day. Give, I pray thee, whatsoever cometh to thy hand unto thy servants and to thy son David. Verse 9. And when David's young men came, they spake to Nabal according to all those words in the name of David, and ceased. So they was pretty much relaying the message to Nabal, what David told them to tell him. All right. Verse 10. And Nabal answered David's servants and said, who is David? And who is the son of Jesse? There be many servants nowadays that break away every man from his master. Now remember, this is a Judite that they're talking to now. So imagine going to a brother with a lot of possessions. All right. He's wealthy. He got a good thing going for him. He got people that's working for him. You understand? And you sent messengers out to this brother, right? And you tell him, you come in peace, and you send peace to him. You understand? You send peace to him. You send peace to his household and everything that he has. You understand? You came in peace. All right. And he says, we heard you had shearers. A shearer is someone who grooms sheep or trimming down the hairs on his body, like a haircut. You understand? So they basically telling him, you know, we didn't harm your men. We didn't take nothing from them. If you don't believe us, you can go ask them for yourself. By the orders of David. You understand? By the orders of David, cut some of your possessions down to thy servants and unto thy son David. You understand? Man, the ball looked at these brothers. Let me read it from the top. Verse 10. It says, and the ball answered David's servants, and said, who is David? And who is the son of Jesse? There be many servants nowadays that break away every man from his master. Man, the ball looked at these brothers like they was crazy. Like, nigga, first of all, who the hell is David? And who the hell is Jesse? I don't know them. People come and go nowadays in need of a job from their master. You understand? Verse 11. Shall I then take my bread and my water and my flesh that I have killed for my shearers and give it unto men whom I know not whence they be? You hear when the ball's asking these brothers, man? If you think, okay, I'm gonna say it in a way like a Judite would say it. If you think I'm gonna take everything that I work hard for and give it to niggas I don't know, y'all got me messed up. If you think I'm gonna do that, y'all better get the hell on with that. This for the shearers, not for you. That's pretty much what Nabal told David's servants. He pretty much dismissed them in a strong, you understand, in a strong, most, how can I put it? In the most dismissive way that you can dismiss somebody. You understand? Because remember, this brother was churlish and very evil in his doings. So anything that came out of his mouth wasn't in the nicest terms, so to speak. You understand? Verse 12. It says, so David's young men turned their way and went again and came and told him all those sayings. So they relayed the message back to David and told him what Nabal said. You understand? Verse 13. And David said unto his men, gird ye on every man his sword. And they girded on every man his sword. And David also girded on his sword. And there went up after David about 400 men, and 200 abode by the stuff. Verse 14. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he railed on them. You understand? Now, rail, according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it means to reproach angrily and abusively. All right. Google's definition of rail means complain or protest strongly or persistent about. So, in other words, right? In other words, Nabal dismissed the hell out of David's servants in request of giving what he has to his servants and to David. All right. His response, once again, it was a strong rejection. Nabal was offended, you understand, and felt highly disrespected. Like they got some nerve to ask of him to give what he has to a bunch of strangers as if they done him a favor. Which is why one of the young men of Nabal is explaining what's going on to his wife, Abigail. Even he knew that what he said was harsh. You understand? Let's keep going. Let's get verse 15. It says, but the men were very good unto us and were not hurt. And we were not hurt, neither missed we anything, as long as we were conversant with them when we were in the fields. All right, verse 16. Then they were a wall unto us both by night and day, all the while we were with them keeping the sheep. David's young men protected. So, in other words, what he's telling Abigail is David's young men protected us night and day and made sure that we weren't harmed. They made sure that nothing was taken. They looked out for us. You understand? They've been good to us all the while we were keeping the sheep. You understand? Verse 17. It says, now, therefore, know and consider what thou wilt do, for evil is determined against our master and against all his household. For he is such a son of Belial that a man cannot speak to him. You understand? So when you look up Belial in the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, right? It says it's not a noun in the Old Testament, but a word meaning worthless, wickedness, lawlessness. You understand? And we're going to get a precept. We're going to hold what we got, and we're going to go to Deuteronomy 13 and 13. All right. Let's hold what we got and let's pull Deuteronomy 13. Verse 13. We're going to read down to 16. All right. This is Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 13. It says, certain men, the children of Belial, are gone out from among you and have withdrawn the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which ye have not known. Verse 14. Then shalt thou inquire and make search and ask diligently, and behold, if it be truth and the thing certain that such abomination is wrought among you. Verse 15. Thou shalt surely smite the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, destroying it utterly, and all that is therein, and the cattle thereof, with the edge of the sword. Verse 16. And thou shalt gather all the spoils of it into the midst of the street thereof, and shall burn with fire the city and all the spoil thereof, every whit, for the Lord thy God. And it shall be an heap forever; it shall not be built again. So was David wrong for what he was going to go and do to Nabal and his household? He was not, because we're just reading the precept with why he said what he said. You understand? So now let's go back to 1 Samuel 25 and let's reread verse 17. It says, now therefore know and consider what thou wilt do, for evil is determined against our master and against all his household, for he is such a son of Belial that a man cannot speak to him. Verse 18. Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves and 2 bottles of wine and 5 sheep ready dressed and 5 measures of parched corn and 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs, and laid them on asses. Verse 19. And she said unto her servants, go on before me. Behold, I come after you. But she told not her husband Nabal. Verse 20. And it was so, as she rode on the ass, that she came down by the covert of the hill, and behold, David and his men came down against her, and she met them. Verse 21. All right. Now David has said, surely in vain have I kept all that this fellow hath in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that pertained unto him, and he hath requited me evil for good. Verse 22. So and more also do God unto the enemies of David, if I leave of all that pertain to him by the morning light any that pisseth against the wall. But David was pissed. You understand? David was fired up. Once again, right? So what David is saying right here, he's saying he looked out for Nabal's young men night and day. Now remember, the young man who told Abigail what was going on, he admitted, you understand? He admitted that they treated them kind and protected them. Nabal wasn't trying to hear that, though. He wasn't trying to hear that. David said he requited me evil for good, meaning the service that I provided for him should have been paid for. Instead, my man came back unto me with nothing. And you paid me back evil, I'll return the favor back unto you. Why do you think Abigail made haste, gathering all that food together before David and his men arrived? This also tells you the spirit this woman had on her, a good understanding. You understand? She's doing what her husband should have done when David sent his young men out to Nabal that he turned away. So now let's see how Abigail is going to respond to this urgent message. You understand? Verse 23. It says, and when Abigail saw David, she hasted and lighted off the ass and fell before David on her face and bowed herself to the ground. Verse 24. All right. And fell at his feet and said, upon me, my Lord, upon me let this iniquity be. And let thine handmaid, I pray thee, speak in thine audience and hear the words of thine handmaid. Verse 25. Let not my lord, I pray thee, regard this man of Belial, even Nabal. For as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, thine handmaid, saw not the young men of my Lord, whom thou didst send. Verse 26. Now, therefore, my Lord, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, seeing the Lord hath withholden thee from coming to shed blood, and from avenging thyself with thine own hand. Now let thine enemies and they that seek evil to my Lord be as Nabal. Verse 27. And now this blessing which thine handmaid hath brought unto my Lord, let it even be given unto the young men that follow my Lord. Verse 28. I pray thee, forgive the trespass of thine handmaid, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord fighteth the battles of the Lord, and evil have not been found in thee all thy days. Verse 29. Yet a man is risen to pursue thee and to seek thy soul. But the soul of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of life with the Lord thy God. And the souls of thine enemies, them shall he sling out as of the middle of a sling. Verse 30. And it shall come to pass when the Lord shall have done to my Lord according to all the good that he hath spoken concerning thee, and shall have appointed thee ruler over Israel. Verse 31. That this shall be no grief unto thee, nor offense of heart unto my Lord, either that thou hast shed blood causeless, or that my Lord hath avenged himself. But when the Lord shall have dealt well with my Lord, then remember thine handmaid. Now tell me that this ain't a woman of good understanding right here. For her to come, listen, man, for her to come down to David, humbling herself, accepting the iniquity of Salaki, for her to come down to David, humbling herself, accepting the iniquity to be on her because she didn't see the young men when they came, asked for forgiveness, prayed that the enemies of David will be overthrown. You don't have to avenge yourself. Don't let this offend you. And you know what else that this woman did? She acknowledged who David was. Remember what Nabal said when David's servants came to him? He said, who is David and who is the son of Jesse? Abigail knew who David was. You understand? She knew that he fought the battles of the Lord and no evil has been found among him all the days of his life. And the time is going to come to pass that he will be appointed ruler over Israel. She is standing in the presence of a king. When the Lord deals with my Lord, remember thine handmaid. Don't forget about me or the words that I've spoken unto you. That's what Abigail just said to David. You understand? Now let's read what David had to say about this. Verse 32. And David said to Abigail, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, which sent thee this day to meet me. Verse 33. And blessed be thy advice, and blessed be thou, which hast kept me this day from coming to shed blood, and from avenging myself with my own hand. Verse 34. For in very deed, as the Lord God of Israel liveth, which have kept me back from hurting thee, except thou hast hasted and come to meet me, surely there had not been left unto Nabal by the morning light any that pisseth against the wall. Abigail just saved her ass and saved the husband's ass and everything in that household. If she wouldn't have came and did what she done, David, listen, man, everybody in that household would be dead, man. What Abigail just did was a righteous thing. You understand? Which is why he's commending her that he took heed to her advice with what she said. And because she said what she said, man, David spared Abigail. David spared Nabal and his household. You understand? Verse 35. It says, so David received of her hand that which she had brought him, and said unto her, go up in peace to thine house. See, I have hearkened to thy voice and have accepted thy persons. You understand? Once again, not only did he spare Abigail, he spared Nabal and his household. Everything David was supposed to destroy, he pardoned because of Abigail. You understand? Everything she did. Now, remember now, everything that Abigail just did, she didn't tell her husband. So he had no idea that David and his men were coming to kill him and everything in his household. He didn't know that. You understand? Because she didn't tell him. All right. Verse 36. Let's see. Verse 36. And Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he held a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunken. Wherefore she told him nothing, less or more, until the morning light. You understand? So he was drunk as hell, having a good time with no cares in the world. You understand? And she didn't tell him nothing. She just rather wait to tell him everything in the morning. All right. Verse 37. But it came to pass in the morning, when the wine was gone out of Nabal, and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him, and he became as a stone. Verse 38. And it came to pass about 10 days after that the Lord smote Nabal, that he died. That man had a heart attack and died after Abigail told him everything a few days later. You understand? Verse 39. And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Blessed be the Lord, that hath pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and hath kept his servant from evil. For the Lord hath returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head. And David sent and communed with Abigail to take her to him to wife. Verse 40. And when the servants of David were come to Abigail to Carmel, they spake unto her, saying, David sent us unto thee to take thee to him to wife. Verse 41. And she arose and bowed herself on her face to the earth, and said, Behold, let thine handmaid be a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. Good night. Verse 42. And Abigail hasted and arose and rode upon an ass with 5 damsels of hers that went after her. And she went after the messengers of David and became his wife. Verse 43. And David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they were also both of them his wives. Verse 44. But Saul had given Michal his daughter, David's wife, to Phalti, the son of Laish, which was of Galem. You understand? So, in essence, David got him another wife after the Lord rendered judgment on Nabal for his wickedness. You understand? Abigail was a righteous sister. You understand? She offered to wash his servant's feet after coming to bring her to David to have as a wife. You understand? Very hospitable, kind, good understanding, and beautiful. Like this woman, okay, excuse me. This woman that we just read about, Abigail, this woman was virtuous. You understand? Solomon quoted in Proverbs 31, who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. Meaning, these are extremely, extremely rare women to find. Like, these are the daughters that we're raising in the UPK, which is why our wives in here are precious and rare. People like to say all the time, you know, it's hard to find a good woman, or it's hard to find a good man. The Bible tells you exactly what to look for and what to stay away from in a man or a woman. You understand? So now we are now in 1 Samuel 26, and we are going to start at, let's see. Let's see, what did I put? Sloppy, give me a minute. Okay. All right. So we're going to skip down to verse 7. So for time's sake, I'm going to fill in with what's going on between verses 1 through 6. All right. So what's happening here is Saul's men, okay? Saul's men heard where David's whereabout was in the wilderness. All right. So now Saul gathers an army to go after David once again after all the promises and the swearing that he made that he wouldn't mess with him anymore. So David sends spies up ahead to confirm that he was coming. And sure enough, Saul was coming. All right. So because he knows now that Saul is coming, they find where Saul and his men were laying down in the trenches. Okay. They were down in the trenches sleeping. So one of David's men volunteered to go with him down at their camp. And this is where the story picks up in verse 7. All right. So now this is 1 Samuel 26, and we're going to start at verse 7. It says, so David and Abishai came to the people by night, and behold, Saul lay sleeping within the trench, and his spear stuck in the ground at his bolster. But Abner and the people lay round about him. Verse 8. All right. Then said Abishai to David, God hath delivered thine enemy into thy hand this day. Now, therefore, let me smite him, I pray thee, with the spear even to the earth at once, and I will not smite him the second time. Boy, you see how cold Abishai is? Man, he's so cold with that spear. Where Saul was laying out, sleep, knocked out in the trenches, all he needed was to stab him one time. He don't need to stab him more than one time to get him. He said the first time he get him, he gonna stab him where it hurt and take his life away. You understand? Verse 9. And David said to Abishai, destroy him not, for who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? You understand? Now, why didn't David want to destroy Saul where he lay? Because you won't be guiltless putting to death the Lord's anointed. That's why. Verse 10. David said, furthermore, as the Lord liveth, the Lord shall smite him, or his day shall come to die, or he shall descend into battle and perish. All right, so one or two things is going to happen right here. All right, one or two things is going to happen. Either the Lord is going to smite him similar to Nabal's judgment, you understand, or the other, or he's going to fall in battle and perish. Now remember this verse, because later on Saul's judgment will be revealed by someone who's going to remind him of what was said about this king, about his kingdom. All right, we're going to keep it moving. Let's go to verse 11. It says, the Lord forbid that I should stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed, but I pray thee, take thou now the spear that is at his bolster and the cruse of water, and let us go. All right, so David's telling Abishai, okay, here's what we're going to do. Let's just take his spear and his canteen of water and let's roll. Let's bounce. All right. Verse 12. So David took the spear and the cruse of water from Saul's bolster, and they gat them away, and no man saw it nor knew it, neither awaked, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord was fallen upon them, right? Because the Lord was with David. All right. Verse 13. Then David went over to the other side and stood on the top of a hill afar off, a great space between them, a great space being between them. Selah. Verse 14. And David cried to the people and to Abner the son of Ner, saying, answerest thou not, Abner? Then Abner answered and said, who art thou that criest to the king? Verse 15. And David said to Abner, art not thou a valiant man? And who is like to thee in Israel? Wherefore then hast thou not kept thy lord the king? For there came one of the people in to destroy the king thy lord. Verse 16. This thing is not good that thou hast done. As the Lord liveth, ye are worthy to die, because ye have not kept your master, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is, and the cruse of water that was at his bolster. But David was smooth, man. He put what? Let me tell you what just happened, man. David just put Abner to shame. All right. The king or the Lord's anointed is supposed to be protected at all times, man. Abner wasn't doing his job. You understand? He let David sneak in his camp and took Saul's spear and his canteen. What Abner was doing when this happened? He was knocked out, sleeping good. You understand? If it had been somebody else, they would have died, and the blame would have been all on him because he failed to protect the king. That's why David is shaming Abner because of this. You understand? Verse 17. And Saul knew David's voice and said, "Is this thy voice, my son David?" And David said, "It is my voice, my Lord, O king." And he said, verse 18, and he said, "Wherefore doth my Lord thus pursue after his servant? For what have I done? Or what evil is in mine hand?" So he's like, "Listen, man, tell me what I did. Tell me what I did wrong to have you pursuing after me this time. You understand? Because I didn't do anything. Tell me what I did wrong. What reason do you have to come after me and hunt me down? What did I do to you?" That's what David is asking Saul right now. You understand? Verse 19. All right. Let's get verse 19. It says, "Now, therefore, I pray thee, let my Lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord have stirred thee up against me, let him accept an offering. But if they be the children of men, cursed be they before the Lord, for they have driven me out this day from abiding in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, Go and serve other gods." So what David was saying is this right here. If the Lord stirred you up against me, then accept an offering. All right. But if it's the children of men, meaning if it's some brothers from your own camp that put you up to this, then cursed be they who driven me out from staying in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, Go serve other gods. That's what David was saying. You understand? Verse 20. "Now, therefore, let not my blood fall to the earth before the face of the Lord. For the king of Israel is come out to seek a flea, as when one doth hunt a partridge in the mountains." Verse 21. "Then said Saul, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will no more do thee harm, because my soul was precious in thy eyes this day. Behold, I have played the fool and have erred exceedingly." All right, so once again, right, it takes a lot from Saul to own up to his wrongdoings, okay? Because Saul is very selfish and only thinks about himself. If y'all been tuning in watching the last few classes, Saul messed up so many times and still messing up. You understand? Verse 22. It says, "And David answered and said, Behold, the king's spear, and let one of the young men come over and fetch it." Verse 23. "The Lord render to every man his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord delivered thee into my hand today, but I will not stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed." David telling him straight up, listen, man, the Lord delivered you in my hands again today. Could have taken the chance to put you away, but I will not put my hands on the Lord's anointed. This ain't the first time the Lord has delivered Saul into his hand. There's been a number of times where David could have easily killed Saul. You understand? But throughout those opportunities he had to put Saul to death because of what he did, pursuing after him, David did not do it. You understand? Because he would not put his hands on the Lord's anointed, which is what you're not supposed to do. You understand? Still kept his honor and his integrity even after everything Saul put David through. You understand? Verse 24. "And behold, as thy life was much set by this day in mine eyes, so let my life be much set by in the eyes of the Lord, and let him deliver me out of all tribulation." Verse 25. Okay. "Then Saul said to David, Blessed be thou, my son David. Thou shalt both do great things, and also shall still prevail. So David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place." So now we're at First Psalm 27. Salaki, hold on. We're going to skip a chapter. We're going to go to 1 Samuel 28 and 1. All right. Well, I'm gonna just wrap this up in the whole 27th chapter. Pretty much in this chapter, right? David had his mind made up that his life is going to fall into the hands of Saul. After pursuing him time and time and time again, David is strongly leaning on the urge of, the time is going to come where his life is going to end pretty much because of Saul. You understand? He made his mind up that he was going to fall into the hands of Saul, right? So the only choice that he had left is to stay in the land of the Philistines, because everywhere else that David went, Saul hunted him down. The reason why David's going to stay in the land is because David knows that Saul is terrified of the Philistines. So he went to Achish and asked him to give them a place on the countryside. So they'll stay on the outskirts of their city, so it won't be no problems between them and the Philistines. All right. So now we're in 1 Samuel 28, and we're going to pick up at verse 1. All right. This is 1 Samuel 28 and 1. It says, "And it came to pass in those days that the Philistines gathered their armies together for warfare, to fight with Israel. And Achish said unto David, Know thou assuredly that thou shalt go out with me to battle, thou and thy men." Verse 2, "And David said to Achish, Surely thou shalt know what thy servant can do. And Achish said to David, Therefore will I make thee keeper of mine head forever." Verse 3, "Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had lamented him, and buried him in Ramah, even in his own city. And Saul had put away those that had familiar spirits and the wizards out of the land." All right. So now here's a question. What are familiar spirits and wizards? Okay. Don't think how the movies portray demons and wizards, because that's our oppressor's interpretation of what he thinks demons and familiar spirits look like. All right. We're about to read exactly what they are. So let's hold what we got and let's pull Deuteronomy 18. And we're going to start at verse 9. Let's hold what we got and let's pull Deuteronomy 18. And we're going to start at verse 9. Let's find out what this is. All right. So now this is Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse 9. It says, "When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations." Verse 10, "There shall not be found among you any one that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch." You understand? So now let's break this down. What is It says, "There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire." Talking about what? Talking about worshiping Moloch. You understand? Spiritually, when you abort your babies and you send them to Esau's military, having them become drug dealers. You understand? That's passing your babies through the fire. You understand? It says, "Or that useth divination." What is divination? Divination is somebody who's foretelling your future, a fortune teller. You understand? Or giving you a prophetic nature of what's going to happen. Like, what's your zodiac sign? Y'all know when y'all look at them zodiac, what's your zodiac sign? Oh, I'm an Aries, or I'm a Pisces, or I'm a Scorpio. You understand? Telling you about how you are as a person. You understand? Your prophetic nature of who you are. You understand? You're not supposed to be diving into any of those things. All right. It says, "Or an observer of times." What's an observer of times? Astrology. You understand? Your birthday, when they observe your time, or Christmas, which is winter solstice, or New Year's, which is coming, which is a wicked ass holiday. You understand? Or an enchanter or a witch. What is a witch? A witch is a drug dealer. You understand? Why is a witch a drug dealer? Think about it. What does a witch do? A witch goes down in that den and they mix up a potion. Put all them ingredients in that big old pot and they stir it on up. You understand? They're cooking up this potion. You understand? And this potion that you take, it's supposed to make you feel real good. You understand? What would be an example of a witch today? A drug dealer. How does a drug dealer cook cocaine? In a kitchen, in a pot, stirring it up, mixing it up. You understand? When you sniff cocaine, you understand? When you sniff cocaine, it's supposed to make you feel good. You get a high. You understand? But what happens when that high wears off? You understand? What happens when it wears off? Then what you got to do? You got to get some more. You got to keep getting high. You understand? You take a drug long enough, you become what to the drug? You start to become immune to the drug. Now you need something that's going to be stronger than that drug. So now you go from cocaine to now you on heroin. Then from heroin, then you go to morphine. Then from morphine, now you drop dead. You understand? You OD. You understand? Because you was a drug addict. The opposite of a witch that's sent from the Lord is a doctor or a pharmacist. You understand? There's medicines that can heal, that can help you, and can get rid of demons. You understand? Let's keep going. Let's get verse 11. It says, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. What's a necromancer? Someone who raises the dead. You understand? Okay, there's an herb that you can eat that'll make you real sick. You understand? You'll sleep 3 days and wake up able to function without speaking, literally like a zombie. You understand? It's different if a doctor prescribes medicine in a professional capacity. You understand? They put somebody in a medically induced coma. It's for their well-being. You understand? Charmer. What's a charmer? Is that what it is? Or a charmer, right? A charmer is like a prostitute or someone that's charming you to smoke weed. You understand? They're directly involved versus an enchanter. You understand? That's what that is. All right. Verse 12. It says, for all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. Verse 14. It says, for these nations which thou shalt possess, hearken unto observer of times and unto diviners. But as for thee, the Lord thy God have not suffered thee to do so. You ever wonder why we practice doing these abominations today? It's because we followed after these other nations that the Lord told us not to follow after. You understand? Because following after other nations means that we're also going to follow after their gods, follow after their customs. You understand? This is why the Lord told us to stay away from these other nations. All right, let me pull another precept. Let's drop this and pull Leviticus 18 and 3. All right, let's get Leviticus 18 and 3. Let's get Leviticus 18 and 3. This is Leviticus 18 and 3. Now listen closely. It says, after the doings of the land of Egypt, wherein ye dwelt, shall ye not do. And after the doings of the land of Canaan, whither I bring you, shall ye not do, neither shall ye walk in their ordinances. You understand? It's not just about looking like Egyptians and balding your head and putting tattoos all over your body and worshiping the stars. It's talking about worshiping the stars. It's talking about divination. It's talking about familiar spirits. Everything we just read in Deuteronomy, not dressing in their culture. Egypt means bondage for a reason. They forced their culture on us because we're an oppressed people. You understand? So now that we know what wizards and familiar spirits are, let's go back to 1 Samuel 28 and read verse 3 again. All right. This is 1 Samuel chapter 28 and verse 3. It says, now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had lamented him and buried him in Ramah, even in his own city. And Saul had put away those that had familiar spirits and the wizards out of the land. All right. So now we just broke down what familiar spirits were: a charmer, a necromancer, divination. We just went through that. All right. Let's keep going. Verse 4. And the Philistines gathered themselves together and came and pitched in Shunem. And Saul gathered all Israel together, and they pitched in Gabor. Verse 5. And when Saul saw the host of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart greatly trembled. Why? Because once again, Saul is afraid of the Philistines because they were big, strong, and they was really, really tall. You understand? He greatly feared them. How do we know that? Because he feared Goliath. You understand? Which was also a Philistine. You understand? Let's keep going. Verse 8. And when Saul inquired of the Lord answered him not, neither by dreams, neither by Urim, nor by prophets. Now, what is a Urim? You understand? Urims were dice that they rolled that would tell them what the Lord said. You understand? They used them to make decisions. Now, why didn't the Lord answer Saul? Why didn't the Lord answer Saul? Because the Lord, Saul was still anointed. But why didn't the Lord answer him? The reason why he didn't answer him was because the Lord wasn't with him anymore. After he messed up, sparing Agag and the rest of that good cattle that he was told to destroy, all bets was off with the Lord. You understand? He dropped him quick. He will no longer be with Saul from that point going forward. You understand? Verse 7. Then said Saul unto his servants, seek me a woman that hath a familiar spirit, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, behold, there is a woman that hath a familiar spirit at Endor. Now wait a goddamn minute. Wait a minute. Didn't Saul just drive them all out of the land? Why is he looking for someone with a familiar spirit all of a sudden? Why is he looking for someone? People do desperate things when they fall on desperate times. You understand? The Lord wasn't answering Saul anymore. You understand? He wasn't answering him by prophets. He wasn't answering him by dreams. What else it said? He wasn't answering him by the Urim. You understand? He couldn't go to Samuel because Samuel was dead. So guess what? In Saul's mind, he's running out of options. He's scared. He's scared as hell from the Philistines and don't know what to do. You understand? So nobody else could tell him what he needed to do to win the battle against the Philistines. So what other advice or what other choice did he have left to make? Find him a woman who had a familiar spirit. Imagine that. You understand? Imagine that. Verse 8. And Saul disguised himself and put on other raiment, and he went, and two men, and Salaki, I lost my spot. And two men with him, and they came to the woman by night. And he said, I pray thee, divine unto me by the familiar spirit, and bring me him up whom I shall name unto thee. Listen, man. Saul was so desperate for answers. This brother disguised himself and put on other clothes where you wouldn't recognize who he was at night. Now, does this sound like a wicked holiday that comes around every year at the end of October? Don't this sound like this sounds like Halloween, don't it? What Saul was doing was evil, wicked, and disgusting. He didn't have no business doing it in the first place. You understand? But because he was out of options and nobody and the Lord wasn't with him no more, no dreams, no prophets, no Urim. Samuel wasn't there. David wasn't there neither. He had no other choice in his mind. So this was his last resort. You understand? Going back to a person that he drove out, that he knew the Lord was against, that the Lord said was an abomination. We just read it in Deuteronomy, and we also read it in Leviticus. Saul knew that. You understand? But Saul was evil and wicked, man. And he was being selfish. You understand? Let's keep going. Verse 9. And the woman said unto him, behold, Thou knowest what Saul hath done, how he hath cut off those that have familiar spirits, and the wizards out of the land. Wherefore then layest thou a snare for my life to cause me to die? Okay, so now, before this time, right? And for those who haven't watched any of the series, man, I strongly recommend you go watch those classes, man. Go watch those classes, man, so you can catch up with what's been happening up to this point right here. All right. But for those who don't know, right, before this time, Saul made it his business as king of Israel to get rid of the people with familiar spirits. And when he came to this woman, he came to her in disguise and asked for her to bring up who he asked to bring up. You understand? So she's asking him, why are you trying to trap me? Saul got rid of them. She wasn't no, this woman that he was talking to, she wasn't no dummy. She knew if anybody found out what she was doing, they was going to execute judgment on her because Saul already kicked them out of that land. You understand? He drove them away. All right. Verse 10. And Saul swear to her by the Lord, saying, as the Lord liveth, there shall no punishment happen to thee for this thing. Man, Saul just promised on the Lord no punishment would happen. But how did he say it? He swore on the Lord. Mistake number two, because he's done this before in the past. He always swearing to the Lord. If I ain't mistaken, I brought this out last week about you're not supposed to swear on the Lord's name, which is why we don't swear. You understand? Let your yea be yea, and let your nay be nay. Saul wasn't supposed to swear on the Lord. He did it again. He kept messing up. You understand? Out of desperation. You understand? In search of an answer. You understand? Verse 11. Then said the woman, whom shall I bring up unto thee? And he said, bring me up Samuel. Now, Samuel was the priest that anointed Saul, that made him king. All right. Samuel was the high priest during the time Saul became king and was ruling. All right. He was who Saul would go to get answers from the Lord. This is who he, okay. Saul was the guy that saw Salakia. Samuel was the guy Samuel went, Salakia. Samuel was who Saul went to inquire of the Lord anytime he needed to make a hard decision. All right. That's who Samuel was to Saul. All right. Verse 12. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice. And the woman spake to Saul, saying, why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. Right. So the demon, right? The demon told this woman that this man that was in disguise that came to you at night, this was Saul. You understand? This was Saul talking to you. She turned around and said, why did you lie to me? You are Saul. Now, here's the question. Here's the interesting question, though, right? How would she know that this was Saul unless somebody told her? She wouldn't. Somebody told her that this was Saul. She's talking to who she thinks is Samuel, but really is a demon. You understand? Verse 13. And the king said unto her, be not afraid, for what sawest thou? And the woman said unto Saul, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. Verse 14. And he said unto her, what form is he of? And she said, an old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel. And he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed himself. So now he thinks that this woman is seeing as she's conjuring up the demon spirit, right? Saul is thinking this is Samuel because Samuel did wear a mantle, and Samuel also was an old man during the time he was living when he was dealing with Saul. All right, verse 15. And Samuel said to Saul, why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up? And Saul answered, I am sore distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and the Most High is departed from me, and answereth me no more, neither by prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I have called thee, that thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do. So now we're getting the reason why he disturbed Samuel, or why he disturbed this demon. You understand? As you can see, Saul was stressed out. He said, I was sore distressed. You understand? I'm stressed out. I don't know what else to do. You understand? He didn't know what else to do. Why? Because the Philistines, they make war against me, and God has departed from me, and answereth me no more, neither by prophets nor by dreams. He tried to inquire of the Lord. The Lord didn't answer him. He didn't answer him by prophets. He didn't answer him by dreams, by Urim, nothing. You understand? Didn't give him nothing. He says, therefore I have called thee, that thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do. So once again, like I said before, Samuel was who Saul would go to when he couldn't make hard decisions on his own. This was who he got. This is who he received counseling from Samuel. But Samuel was dead. All right. Verse 17. Verse 16. Then said Samuel, wherefore then dost thou ask of me, seeing the Lord is departed from thee and is become thine enemy? Listen, man. You gotta have the spirit of the Lord on you to read this story, man. You understand? So as Saul is telling this demon why he conjured him up. Remember, Saul is telling this demon, the Lord wasn't answering him anymore. He ran out of options. He stressed out. So the only person I could think of was you. I need you to tell me what I need to do. So the demon, like, well, hell, if the Lord is now your enemy and he ain't answering you, what the hell are you asking me? What the hell are you asking me for? You understand? If the Lord ain't dealing with you, what makes you think I know? The Lord ain't with you. You understand? I'm sorry. Verse 17. And the Lord have done to him as he spake by me. For the Lord hath rent the kingdom out of thine hand, and given it to thy neighbor, even to David. Verse 18. Because thou obeyest not the voice of the Lord, nor executest his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore have the Lord done this thing unto thee this day. Verse 19. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with thee into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me. The Lord also shall deliver the host of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. So now, how is the demon able to say these things that Samuel said to Saul before? How was he able to tell him these things? Because the demon was there when he said it. That's why. Okay, Samuel, before he died, right? He told Saul that the Lord will take the kingdom from his hands and give it to David. He told him that already. Saul knew this, but at the time, Saul hadn't given up the kingdom. You understand? So now he's holding on, trying to stay king, trying to hold on to his kingdom. You understand? This army that's coming up against him, he's scared. So he's trying to seek the Lord to find out what he needed to do, because he don't know what to do. You understand? So now he finds out why from this demon. You understand? So the demon is speaking on behalf of Samuel, telling him, you understand? Didn't I tell you that the kingdom would be taken from you? So now Saul is thinking back and remembering what he told him because he forgot. You understand? Verse 20. It says, then Saul fell straightway all along on the earth and was sore afraid because of the words of Samuel. And there was no strength in him, for he had eaten no bread all the day, nor all the night. Saul knew he messed up in the first place. All right. He knew he messed up. Because first of all, okay, he dealt with a familiar spirit. The demon told him things he knew was true. The Lord wasn't with him. You understand? The Lord left him. The kingdom wasn't in his hands. He was going to fall and lose to the Philistines. So now guess what? He was sad. The nigga was crying. and didn't want to eat nothing all day and all night. Like he was just, he is like, dang, you got but 24 hours to live. Huh? Like, and it ain't nothing you can do about it. You know what I'm saying? Saul was effed up in the head, man. Like he was like, well, damn, like, you know what I mean? He was just lost for words. Didn't want to eat, drink, nothing. You understand? Verse 21. And the woman came unto Saul and saw that he was sore troubled, and said unto him, Behold, thine handmaid have obeyed thy voice, and I have put my life in my hand, and have hearkened unto the words which thou spakest unto me. So now this woman had to check on him and let him know at the same time, look now, I done did what you asked me to do, and I put my life on the line doing this for you. All right. Verse 22. Now, therefore, I pray thee, hearken thou also unto the voice of thine handmaid, and let me set a morsel of bread before thee, and eat, that thou mayest have strength when thou goest on thy way. So she tried to cheer him up by at least feeding the brother so she could send him on his way, because he wasn't eating nothing. You understand? Verse 23. But he refused and said, I will not eat. But his servants together with the woman compelled him, and he hearkened unto their voice. So he arose from the earth and sat upon the bed. So listen, man, he wouldn't listen to the woman. So now the men that came with Saul, they was like, man, come on, Saul. We know you troubled about what was revealed to you, but man, you got to eat something, man. Come on, man. Put something in your stomach, man. You ain't ate all day, man. You need to eat something. Yeah, that's right. You do need to eat so you can have some strength, so you can be on your way. You understand? It took some convincing from his men for him to listen and him to start to finally get himself together and eat something. All right. Verse 24. And the woman had a fat calf in the house, and she hasted and killed it, and took flour and kneaded it, and did bake unleavened bread thereof. And she brought it before Saul and before his servants, and they did eat. Then they rose up and went away that night. All right, so now we're in 1 Samuel 29. Well, Salaki, hold on. We're gonna skip a couple of chapters, man. We're gonna get straight to the point. All right. Let's skip and go to 1 Samuel chapter 31. All right. Salaki, give me 1 minute. Let's see where we at. Okay, so now this is 1 Samuel 31 and 1. It says, now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines, and fell down slain in Mount Gabor. All right, so now this was the battle that was prophesied where Saul was going to fall in this battle. We're reading what's about to take place right now. Okay, verse 2. So like I'll start from the top. This is 1 Samuel 31 and 1. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines, and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons. And the Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, Saul's sons. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. So now, as you can see, Israel was losing this fight. You understand? They was losing this battle. His sons got killed in the battle. Now Saul got hit by an arrow by an archer. All right. Verse 4. Then said Saul unto his armor bearer, draw thy sword and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armor bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. In other words, Saul didn't want them Philistines torturing and abusing him. You understand? Because if it was up to them, they would give him a slow death. You understand? That's why he asked his armor bearer to go ahead and finish him off, but he refused to do it. So Saul took a sword and took his own life. You understand? Verse 5. And when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise upon his sword and died with him. So he went on ahead and ended his life alongside Saul. You understand? Verse 6. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor bearer, and all his men that same day together. So all of them were defeated on that day with Saul. All right. Verse 7. And when the men of Israel that were on the other side of the valley, and they that were on the other side Jordan, saw that the men of Israel fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities and fled. And the Philistines came and dwelt in them. Now, normally, right? So, meanwhile, the men of Israel who heard about the defeat, right? They got out of the city and fled while the Philistines just came in our city and they dwelt in them. You understand? Verse 8. And it came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen in Mount Gabor. Right. So anytime a victory is won over another people, right? Normally they take whatever they had on them. You understand? Well, as they were stripping whatever was on us in battle, they found Saul and his sons laid there dead. All right. Verse 9. It says, and they cut off his head and stripped off his armor and sent into the land of the Philistines round about to publish it in the house of their idols and among the people. Man, they cut Saul's head off and removed his armor, took it back to their land to publish it in their house of their idols as a trophy. Think of going to a museum to see something ancient and extremely valuable in there. Whatever famous temples they had set up with their idols, they had Saul's head and armor in there. All right. Verse 10. And they put his armor in the house of Asherah, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. Verse 11. And when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard of that which the Philistines had done to Saul, verse 12. All the valiant men arose and went all night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan and came to Jabesh and burnt them there. You understand? And burnt them there. So pretty much they pinned all 3 of their bodies together on the wall, and then they took them down and then they burnt them with fire. You understand? They burnt the corpse with fire, pretty much. Verse 13. And they took their bones and buried them under a tree at Jabesh and fasted 7 days. So this was some kind of sick ritual that they performed over their bodies unto their idols, because that's where this took place. Unto their idols. All right. So now, let me see what time I got. I'll break down one more chapter. This is 2 Samuel 1:1. All right. This will be the last chapter for tonight. It says, now it came to pass after the death of Saul, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, and David had abode 2 days in Ziklag. Verse 2. It came even to pass on the 3rd day that, behold, a man came out of the camp from Saul with his clothes rent and earth upon his head. And so it was, when he came to David, that he fell to the earth and did obeisance. All right. So let me tell you what's going on here, right? So this man came to David to pay his respects unto him. Now, David didn't know what happened to Saul and his sons. This man is about to break the news to him. You understand? Because anytime when you see somebody with earth on their head or dirt on their head and their clothes is rent, somebody died. You understand? Either somebody very important then died, or the battle was lost. Like, we lost. You understand? So that's what was taking place. And now he's about to fill in to David what happened. All right. Verse 3. And David said unto him, From whence comest thou? And he said unto him, Out of the camp of Israel am I escaped. Verse 4. And David said unto him, How went the matter? I pray thee, tell me. And he answered, That the people are fled from the battle, and many of the people also are fallen and dead. And Saul and Jonathan, his son, are dead also. You understand? So now, going back from the top. And David said unto him, How went the matter? I pray thee, tell me. He answered, That the people are fled from the battle, and many of the people also are fallen and dead. And Saul and Jonathan, his son, also are dead also. You understand? So this man that came to David, filling him in with what happened, is telling him, I came from out of Saul's camp. You understand? Israel lost, right? The rest who were left had fled from the battle. Many have fallen, including Saul and his 3 sons. You understand? And here's what David's response was when he found out they died in battle. And David, verse 5, and David said unto the young man that told him, How knowest thou that Saul and Jonathan his son be dead? So he's like, man, how you know Saul and his sons are dead? Now remember now, David and Jonathan, they were tight. You understand? They was real tight. You understand? They had an unbreakable brotherhood. So when he found out Jonathan had fallen, oh, this hit hard for David. This right here hit home for him. You understand? Because this wasn't just no ordinary brother that had fallen in battle. This was his brother. You understand? A brother. You understand? Verse 6. And the young man that told him said, As I happened by chance upon Mount Gilboa, behold, Saul leaned upon his spear, and lo, the chariots and horsemen followed hard after him. All right, verse 7. And when he looked behind him, he saw me and called unto me. And I answered, Here am I. Verse 8. And he said unto me, Who art thou? And I answered him, I am an Amalekite. Verse 9. He said unto me again, Stand, I pray thee, upon me, and slay me. For anguish is come upon me, because my life is yet whole in me. Meaning his life was full of mental suffering and pain. You understand? He had this evil spirit on him for a number of years. You understand? He had this spirit on him for a number of years. He was reminded what was going to happen to him. The Lord wasn't with him anymore. Samuel was gone. David wasn't there. This was the end of the road for him. He just wanted it all to end right there. You understand? That's why Saul said, Stand, I pray thee, upon me, and slay me, for anguish is come upon me, because my life is yet whole in me. Verse 10. So I stood upon him and slew him, because I was sure that he could not live after that he was fallen. And I took the crown that was upon his head, and the bracelet that was on his arm, and have brought them hither unto my Lord. Verse 11. All right. Then David took hold on his clothes and rent them, and likewise all the men that were with him. So David and his men, out of respect, they lamented for Saul. Even though what Saul did to him was evil and wicked, David still had great respect for him, and because he's also the Lord's anointed as well. All right. Verse 12. And they mourned and wept and fasted until even for Saul, and for Jonathan his son, and for the people of the Lord, and for the house of Israel, because they were fallen by the sword. Verse 13. And David said unto the young men that told him, Whence art thou? And he answered, I am the son of a stranger in Amalekite. So now he's questioning exactly who he is. Like, who are you? You understand? And he said, I am the son of a stranger in Amalekite. Right? Verse 14. Okay. And David said unto him, How wast thou not afraid to stretch forth thine hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? Verse 15. And David called one of the young men and said, Go near and fall upon him. And he smote him that he died. Because once again, you slaying the Lord's anointed, you're going to get put to death for it, which is what happened to this young man right here, because he's slaying the Lord's anointed. You understand? Verse 16. And David said unto him, Thy blood be upon thy head, for thy mouth hath testified against thee, saying, I have slain the Lord's anointed, which is what I just said. All right. Verse 17. And David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan his son. Verse 18. Also he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. So David taught them how to skillfully use the bow and arrow. You understand? How to defend themselves. You understand? Verse 19. It says, The beauty of Israel is slain upon thy high places. How are the mighty fallen? Verse 20. Tell it not in Gath. Publish it not in the streets of Ascalon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. You understand? Don't make this publicly known to where the Philistines are going to hear about it, lest they're going to rejoice. You understand? Because that was a great feat for them to destroy King Saul, because he was a king. You understand? No different than how we would destroy kings of the other nations and how we would celebrate because the Lord gave us the victory. Well, in that day, the Lord was against Saul and prophesied that he was going to fall in battle, and that we would fall by the hand of the Philistines. You understand? So let's not make this publicly known to where they're going to get hyped and excited and big-headed because they defeated Saul and his sons, and we're in mourning. You understand? And we fled from battle. The victory is theirs. Let's not make this a public thing. You understand? Verse 21. Ye mountains of Gabor, let there be no dew, neither let there be rain upon you, nor fields of offerings. For there the shield of the mighty is vilely cast away, the shield of Saul, as though he had not been anointed with oil. Verse 22. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul returned not empty. Verse 23. Saul and Jonathan were lovely and pleasant in their lives, and in their death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. So it's kind of like David's giving a eulogy and paying respects to David and Jonathan. You understand how they fought the good fight, and they was never separated from each other, and Jonathan was always by his father's side. You understand? So he's paying great respects and providing a eulogy over David, over Saul and Jonathan, and over the men of Israel who fought and lost that battle against the Philistines. You understand? Verse 24. Ye daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet with other delights, who put on ornaments of gold upon your apparel, because Saul was very rich. You understand? Saul was rich. He had decked out clothes and apparel, and all the women dresses and beautiful garments that they wore. He decked them out too. So now he's urging the daughters of Israel to mourn over Saul. You understand? Because he was the one responsible for clothing y'all in scarlet with other delights, who put on ornaments of gold upon your apparel. So the garments that you were wearing, they were not cheap. These were very beautiful, expensive garments. You understand? To make you look beautiful. You understand? Verse 25. How are the mighty fallen in the midst of the battle? O Jonathan, thou wast slain in thine high places. Verse 26. For I am distressed for thee, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant hast thou been unto me. Thy love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women. Why? Because David and Jonathan were so close in their brotherhood that this hurts him a lot to know that Jonathan was killed in battle. You understand? Verse 27. How are the mighty fallen and the weapons of war perished? You understand? So that concludes tonight's class on part 4 of the story of King David. You understand? And so with that, we are going to read this ISUPK security announcements. Give me 1 minute to pull this up. ISUPK security announcements. We are the ISUPK, started out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, rule for new brother and sister. When a new brother or sister comes into the school, they are off limits for 6 months. They are to be saluted only. They are here to shed themselves of the world. If they need transportation, the teacher will arrange it. After 6 months, if a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to a brother or sister. There is another 6 months in which the brother and sister will court each other. After this 6-month period, the brother and sister will get permission from the head to marry. Ties, which is a commandment. Numbers 18, chapter 18, verse 21. Malachi chapter 3, verse 8 through 10 means 10th in the Hebrew, ma'ashara. 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you. Give to the treasury department or teacher. Priest fund is a free will offering for priests, not mandatory, whatsoever amount you would like. If anyone wants to be a trooper in the school, start wearing all black: boots, shirt, pants, headband, scarf. All right, and with that, we say a majum, which means to stand. We're going to give a courtesy salute to the men online. Men of Israel, a majum Shabbat, majum, rock, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua Barakathum. May the Most High bless you in the name of Christ. Yazmatah means hands down. We'll give a courtesy salute to the sisters online. Men of Israel, Major Shabbat, Major, Rock, Yahweh Shemar Latha Ba'Shem Yahushua. May the Most High watch over you in the name of Christ. Yazmatah, hands down, class dismissed.